I'd like to call to order the Village of Ashwaubenon Finance and Personnel Committee for Tuesday, May 30th, 2025. Roll call, please.
Chris Circle.
Here.
Tracy Kuki.
Here.
Kelly Service.
Here.
Tom Selk.
Here.
And Tim Jaden.
Here.
Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please keep in mind our brave men and women that are helping protect us here and abroad. All right. Action on the minutes. Consider minutes on February 19, or from, actually on the agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are moving on. Action on the minutes. Consider act on the minutes of February 19, 2025, from the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion approved. 6 items for discussion and possible action. A, consider, discuss act on recommendation to amend emergency medical services fees and charges.
Good evening. That's loud. Ashwaubenon Public Safety, with our EMS rates, haven't had a since 2021. And as we all know, everything is becoming more and more expensive. So we reached out to our provider that does our billing for us, and we asked them to do a comparison like they have done in the past with other departments, communities in our area. And they came back to us with a rate increase. And our thought is that the fact that we haven't had one in 4 years, obviously it's due. And what we wanted to do is we then put some numbers together for the rest of 2025, starting in June, moving forward to the end of the year, and then in 2026 going with the rates that they've recommended. And then what we would like to do as a department is that yearly, then we look at these rates to make sure we are staying in line with the communities that are around us, to make sure that the village is compensated for rescue. So what you see in front of you with the reviews, you'll see, and I can explain it real quick, like the BLS calls, we have 2 rates. One is for resident, one is for non-resident. And this is a basic life support. This is something that if we get called to, someone, for instance, fell down, and we may just take vitals for them, but then realize, oops, they need to go to the hospital. This may only end up with 2 people on the rescue squad, takes them to the hospital, and the way they go. Again, 2 different rates for resident and non-resident. The ALS, that's advanced life support. That's where we could go to that call, for instance, but now we need 3 on the rescue squad because we're starting an IV, giving them some fluids, or maybe we're administering some type of a drug. And again, difference between the resident and the non-resident, and you'll see that in the green in that second to left-hand column. Those are the rates that we'd like. That first green column you see under Ashwaubenon Public Safety, that's what we are currently charging. So you can kind of see that significant difference for that. But then the ALS2, what that would be, let's just say we went to that same call. Now the person has a heart attack. Now we need more staff. We're using more equipment, obviously. More drugs, for instance, could also be set on that. So again, that's why you're seeing something like that. And then if you look at the BLS on scene, the ALS on scene care, and the ALS on scene care for, again, the residents and non-residents, that's if we were to go to those scenes, for instance, but they sign off. So we're still there, we're still doing medical treatment for them. Again, on a basic life would be we took blood pressure, maybe we administered some type of bandaging, but they said, you know what, I feel good, I don't need the rescue squad to take me to the hospital. We're still going to charge with that as we always have done. And same with an ALS call. That could be like a diabetic call, for instance. The person, we end up administering some type of a sugar to them. They come out of their diabetic issues and they're like, hey, I feel good, I'm okay. Nope, I don't need to go to the hospital. We have them sign off again. But again, because we've maybe administered and done a little bit more advanced care for them, the reason for these charges. And then just one more thing to note on this, these charges of how they come up is how we fill out the forms that we get done with our rescue calls. So if you click on something and you type it in, that may automatically generate what is being charged on here. So it's not just, I'm a paramedic and I feel this person should get charged this, and Greg here, he's an EMT, and all of a sudden he just starts hitting buttons and wants to charge him for this. No, it's the program itself is what dictates of how these charges are also out, which kind of makes it uniform then across the board. No one can say, hey, you charged him something different than you charged me. Again, no different than us knowing that the person's a resident here to a non-resident. So with that, and then just on the bottom there, if you see these other charges. So right now, if we go and we have a no transport / we don't do anything to them, we're at the scene, we identify them and they're saying, hey, here's who I am, but they want nothing done. And this happens a lot. We charge a $200 fee. What we're trying to propose is that we bring that up $50 for every call that we have there. Below that is a lift assist. And this is where I go to your house because you're elderly, you've fallen on the bed, your spouse can't help you up, for instance. What we've had in the past, if you look there, is that we had no charge for the first and second times. After the third time, we said, okay, now we need to start charging you. And again, we want to move that from $200 to $250. Some people say, well, I shouldn't have to pay for anything. You're coming and helping me and you're leaving. Partially. The other part is that we also don't want to come and help you when maybe you might need more than just a lift assist. Maybe there's something going on in your house that you might need to be in a different facility, for instance. Never want to tell anyone that because that's very hard. And whether you have your parents or someone you know is in that situation, they don't want to leave their homes. But we can't keep going to that house trying to lift them every other day, for instance. And we have some residents that this happens to a lot. And one note with this as well is that we've also had many instances where our police officers go there, help them, and they cancel the rescue squad. So they're not even getting this charge, or this is number one or number two to them. So some people get this very well. What we're trying to say is that anytime we have to go to that call for that resident, this is what we're going to charge. Just because, again, twofold. We, A, want to make sure that we have resources here for any other type of call, and B, is that can we help them maybe in a different way? Is there something else that we can do to get them the help or the care that they need in their home? So kind of long-winded, I apologize, but again, this is some of the reasoning for our increases.
It was kind of surprising to see how far below the average we fell on this, and it's nice to see that that we did this now, and then we're going to look to it. I think it's an annually in the future, but you know, and this is all based on the average of other communities. I'm just curious, does this cover our cost? I mean, I know it's hard to come up with that formula, but does this cover our costs per incident, these charges?
So there's actually, unfortunately, another incident with this that needs to be brought up. Excuse me. Medicare and Medicaid. Right now, currently, we are receiving approximately $200, no matter what we have this billed as BLS, ALS, ALS2. It's $200 if we transport it. So if you have an ALS2 and you're a non-resident, for instance, what we would like to have them charged at to what we get from Medicare or Medicaid is substantially less. So I can tell you right now that last year we had 53% paid out by Medicare of our calls. Last year we billed just over $1.5 million. Our payments were $600,000. So partially, some of that may be someone maybe now also not paying their bill, but we have to take into effect of how Medicare is paying it as well. So, Chris, kind of to answer that, these rates, does it cover our cost? Certainly not all the time, no. Substantially less.
Tom, does Medicare or Medicaid cover the just lift at all? Because I had a resident that had that issue, and it seemed like they didn't cover that at all. Is that correct?
That would probably be correct. I think we talked about that, and I
Yep.
think it was brought up. So we don't know that until, because we don't, I mean, they're not telling us saying, yeah, we paid this or paid that. That's obviously coming through the third party.
Third party.
But yeah, I know they're also very finicky on what they'll pay and what they won't pay, but we have unfortunately no ways of making them pay it. The federal government.
I thought we looked at these fees during budget time, didn't we? And raised them? Or we talked about them? I thought recently we did.
Well,
Or was it other?
It sounds recent, but it hasn't been. But about 2021 was the actual last time that we looked at these. For some reason, that feels recent, but when you think about it on paper, it really wasn't that
Yep.
recent. With that being said, there obviously Chief is presenting kind of based on averages, what we would be comparably. Chief and I had some prior conversations to this meeting as well, and just that the village has had a philosophy in the past of having a reduced rate for residents versus non-residents. So that has been the past. So when you look at our rates for residents, they have been substantially lower. That has predominantly been because there has been a philosophy that there would be kind of a subsidy, if you will, because of tax dollars that residents are paying to support that. And so by changing that, although the fee is the fee, it's still changing a philosophy or a policy, if you will, that the village is going to really kind of base its fees on the average. In addition to that, the lift assist, that is a pretty cumbersome component of services that we do provide, but there again, it has been kind of a philosophy. So it'd be to some degree a change in policy by saying, even on your first lift, we're gonna send the bill. So I just want you to be aware of that, because you may receive some concerns from constituents that now after one assist, albeit not every instance, as Chief maybe alluded to, is a call for service for a BLS or ALS care for those lift assists. Oftentimes our officers that are on patrol arrive first. They can provide the assist before the ambulance arrives, and then in that case, it does not become a documented assist. And so it likely wouldn't get billed at that point. So it just want to make sure that everyone is aware that there's, to some degree, with this recommendation, maybe a change in philosophy or policy on how you want to bill out, whether it be for residents and subsidizing that fee, or for the lift assist for people that are, let's just say, frequent flyers for that type of service.
Yeah. Well, and I like that the chief is going to be doing this more often. I think with a lot of our fees, and whether it's our water bills or whatever, when our residents get hit really hard with this stuff, I'd rather see it go up incrementally each year and be surveyed and base it on what's out there. So I'm glad that you're doing this, and I would encourage you to keep doing it every year. And my question on going to 2026 with it, now the numbers based on current averages. So are we going too low in 2026? Should we go a little higher in 2026? Or do you feel comfortable with what you're recommending for 2026?
And I think this is why we put these numbers together, just because we didn't want that shock. And I don't know how many people would be shocked. I think a lot of people try to use their insurance, obviously, but
Yeah.
we want to show that, again, this is kind of a good faith, and we're right around that average of the other communities. And just another point to touch on is that last year, we billed 55% of our billing was 55% residents. It was just under a 44%, they said, non-residents. I guess that doesn't equal 90%, but I guess when you put the points in, it does. But so our non-resident billing was at 44%. Residents was at 55%. Not that it means too much, but kind of lets you know that we're kind of half and half. We're looking at our rescue squad, so where they're coming from or what they're here for, obviously plays a pretty big part with our community.
You know, the other thing that some residents have mentioned, it's a third-party billing that we have that does our billing for ambulance. With the way things are going these days, people are really concerned about getting bills from someone they don't know. And that was some of the concerns I received on bills. And I'm sure it says right on there it's for an Ashwaubenon, business, or, something that you did through Ashwaubenon. But I don't know if there's a way to get it out more so that people understand that, because they get really concerned and they don't want to pay it, and they're like, is this real or is this not? And then when the fees are different, or they're getting someone's coming to lift them off the ground and it's $200, they're like, what the heck, is this real or not? So maybe trying to get that out a little bit too would be good. Because our older residents are the ones that are probably taking advantage of it, and they're, maybe more concerned about that.
I liked the idea that it looks like even with the second increase in '26, we're still below the average. So I'll move to approve the recommendation from Public Safety to raise the rates starting July 1st of 2025, and then again January 1st of 2026 with a yearly review.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. I've just got a question, Chief. Looking at the recommended rates for 2026, they are substantial percentage-wise. Is that kind of a philosophy of, instead of really hitting hard right now, kind of spreading out over 2 years and possibly 3 or 4 down the road? Because it is percentage-wise a pretty big hike.
Right, and I think, again, we haven't had anything done since 2021, and this is why we go to our billing partner. They've done this based on the community averages. So they look at this and go, okay, here's what is being paid, here's what we think is a fair amount for the village of Ashwaubenon based on, your calls for service. So this is, again, why we thought, okay, let's look at 25 this way, because, Chris, like you said, it could knock your socks off if you're not used to that, or you thought, hey, just last time I had a bill was something totally different to now. And again, I think moving forward, and again, I think Tracy also alludes to that, if we do this now each year, that little bit of an increase is going to be very, I think minimum, but I'm not a predictor of how everything's going to happen here in the world, but I think it'll be a lot easier to accept knowing it's maybe up only a few dollars instead of like this, a 4-year gap.
Right. Okay.
Also, Chris, the goal, and I know there's a motion on the floor, the goal ultimately is to consolidate all our fees and charges schedules into one comprehensive document that would be reviewed as part of the budgeting process. So even though they're doing this now, ultimately it'll be enveloped into that overall review. So maybe September, October, the board is looking at the fee and charges schedule that would go into effect January 1 of the following year. And that when you come in November for the budget process, those fees that you've adopted in, let's say, October are included and incorporated into the next year's budget. And that would be kind of a process that we would do every year as part of that budget review. So as department heads are working on developing their budgets in July and August, they're taking into that consideration those changes in fees and charges, and then wrapping it into that overall approval process that'll happen annually. Some fees may not change and others will.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, thanks. No, I just, no, I'm not saying it's out of line by any stretch. In fact, we were below. Just want to know the philosophy on those going forward. Yeah. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 6B, receive, accept the April 2025 year-to-date financial reports. Greg?
So just providing you where we're at in the general fund and our capital and special revenue funds. But general fund, we're just pretty much on plan. There hasn't really been anything that would put us over or under, nothing significant. So I'm just providing you the financials as they are. It's early in the year. Once summer gets through, that's when we really have a better feel, or if something obvious that sticks out. But so far, so good on the 2025 budget. Any questions or concerns that you saw? Certainly can bring those up.
I guess the only question I had, I know we allocated a bunch of resources for the draft. Was it appropriate, or how did we fare, or do we know yet?
So at this point, we had enough to cover. Our expenses should be done at this point. We might have been about 20,000 less than what we anticipated. So there's a chance right now out there that there's potential reimbursement opportunity. So if that were to happen, that'd be wonderful at any rate. But we did have enough money, probably have a little bit left. The plan was to probably put it back to where it came from, which majority of that was from the village building fund. So, but at this point, our expenses were less than what we had budgeted, which is good.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, we did submit a request, or we submitted a request of reimbursement through a WEDC grant application, so Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation application for reimbursement on our draft-related expenses. We have not heard word yet as to whether or not we'll have received that grant award. If we do, then that will get fully reimbursed back into that draft-related fund, and then those funds that got basically reallocated from, let's say, the building maintenance fund would get reallocated through a resolution that would come back before the committee and the board. That's our current effort. There's also efforts at the state level as part of their biannual budget to incorporate reimbursement funding for certain expenses for the draft as well. So if we aren't awarded the WEDC grant, it does not necessarily mean that there isn't still a future opportunity for additional reimbursement from the state of Wisconsin.
Greg, can you explain to me on page 10, the fund balance that's been $5 million and suddenly at the end of December of 2025, it's down to $1 million something?
Yeah, so basically it's taking a starting balance, and because we haven't experienced all of our revenues yet, mostly the tax revenue, we've expended 6.1 million so far this year. We've only brought in 1.7. So that'll catch up when
With the taxes come in?
yeah, we'll get a large number of state aids yet we haven't gotten. So it's kind of a year to date. We don't really do monthly budgeting in government, but the year to date it'll flow, and that's why you have that reserve balance there. And then eventually we'll get that, especially after July and August, when we get the last tax settlements, and then we'll be moving ahead.
You don't do any quarterly budgeting, just on the annual basis?
Yeah.
Okay.
I used to do monthly, and when we got our new auditors, they said, boy, I think you're our only client that does monthly budgeting. So, and it's really, it's just, you're trying to guess when people are going to spend their money or when things are going to happen. So it's not very efficient to do. So.
You don't do it at a high level or anything?
I know, like, when all the major revenues are going to come in, it's sometimes like Park and Rec. That's what I said, after the summer, when Park and Rec experiences the majority of their costs. But whether, they have whether they buy their stuff in March or in April or February to get prepared for summer, that'll throw you off. But once summer is done, once we have all those part-time people come and go, most of the programs there are done, a lot of the street work is all done, all the maintenance on the roads. And then we start to the point where we're just doing leaf collection and snow removal at the end of the year. That's also when our expenditures start to drop down to just basically the payroll costs.
We're relying on you a lot.
We have other people.
I'm just saying, because, yeah.
I think when you're looking at, from an operational standpoint, when you look at operational departments like public safety, public works, parks, rec, and forestry, if you're a quarter of the way through the year or a third of the way through the year, and that's kind of how this year-to-date spreadsheet shows, is we're about a third of the way through the year and we're about a third of the way through our expenditures. That's relatively consistent. On the general government side, often is the case, those are kind of fixed costs and not necessarily variable operating costs. So a lot of times those come in quarterly increments. So you might have a cost for insurance, which is a pretty substantial cost. Those come in quarterly increments. So those get billed a little bit faster and become a higher number. So when you see general government has spent about 37.3%, that's pretty typical each year through the month of April. The tricky part always is on the revenue side, because you won't get the tax settlements until the final tax settlements from the county until July or August, as Greg had mentioned. So from a cash flow perspective, it looks like we're doing terribly bad because we didn't take in $11 million in taxes, when in fact we just haven't settled that number for accounting purposes for this to show up on our financial sheet. And then in addition to that, intergovernmental revenues is also another large item, and those come incrementally. And those are relatively fixed to the state. So we know those numbers going into the budget cycle. It's just a matter of when the state cuts the check. So if you see like 11%, it's because the vast majority of those payments come in twice per year. And so you're getting it once and getting it twice. So it's just, to do the monthly budget, you're just kind of fictitiously coming up with numbers that aren't real then versus just doing what is actual year to date and just understanding that there's some ebb and flow to the procedural accounting aspects of reconciling tax receipts and reconciling payments from the state.
Yeah, 15 million of our 19 million of revenue is going to come January, and then that's taxes are January and August. That's the biggest piece, and then the state aids are going to come in April, May, and July, but then there's a transportation, which is quarterly, so that's a big number. So those are our primary revenue streams, and they come in these odd times throughout the year. Whereas like payroll is 73% of our budget. That's every 2 weeks. It's steady payments out the door. So that's partly why you also have fund balance, so that you don't go negative, right? And you draw off of that, and that's why we have the reserves we have, so that you can cover these periods, mostly your first 6-7 months, where you can cover all of that, and then the end of the year you have excess, but then it drains down because all your revenues come in. So
I'll make a motion to approve the April 2025 year-to-date financial reports.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to receive the reports. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They are accepted. All right, on to C, consider an act on the annual finance policy updates. Greg?
So I won't go into detail on all of these, but just at a high level, right in the spring sometime is where I review policies, bring them for the board or the committee and board if there's any specific changes. This year there were a couple tweaks and updates with some information. I thought I'd just kind of bring them all, just kind of make you also aware what's out there that we have. I'm reviewing policies as the upcoming budget season as well to enhance the budget process. So what you have here are 4 of them, then there'll be 2 other ones after this. But these 4, debt management policy, continuing disclosure policy, fund balance policy, and purchasing policy, all really had no changes, other than the purchasing policy was just to redefine how we process our work credit cards. Instead of just being a manual process, we have a kind of a third-party website that we use. But overall, these are all good policies. The debt management, basically what that's designed to do is to restrict how much debt we can issue. There's statutory requirements, and then we also have our own requirements as far as how much we can limit, and it's like a per capita person, how much we can have in debt at any point in time. I have a report out there that you could see, and that report, I'm sorry, I'm flipping through different screens here. Our statutory it's 5% of your equalized value, so that for us is $203 million of outstanding general obligation debt that you could have. We're at just under 60. So it's also one of these that just because you can have that much debt doesn't necessarily mean you should. All of these things, like in the debt, that's all viewed by Moody's, rating agencies, investors. They look at that stuff. So it's a good health metric. So we have a very, very strong debt limit in place. Our limits that we have also per capita, so roughly 17,000 people in the village says, hey, we can have just under 17 million of general obligation debt. But this one excludes TIF or referendum. So if you take out of the 60 million, you take out TIF and referendum, we're down to only 5.1 million. So again, we allow ourselves 17, we're at 5. So really healthy there. Very similar with the enterprise fund, which are the utility funds. They also meet the policies that are in place about in the same kind of ratios. So just wanted to show you that report because it's important to understand what our limits are. So if we get involved with any future debt needs and think, 60 is a big number. It is. Obviously, we have to pay it back, and it's going to impact budget, but we do have a lot more capacity out there. I've also included the list of all of our existing debt. You can see what it's for. It's a lot of TIF debt for different projects that some are still working through. Some have long been done, but we're still paying for them. Referendum, for example. Feels like the community center and the pool are getting old already. Well, we're still paying off the debt. Some of those were 20-year issues. Those types of things. A lot of road work. And then just listed kind of in the business type, which are utilities, and the Community Development Authority has lease revenue bonds for the facilities on Oneida Street, the Expo Center and the Rush Center. So, any questions, any concerns on the debt management? And I can just kind of go to the next one.
Can I just ask a quick question, Greg? In the debt policy, you have a line of credit that's available in there. Have we ever used a line of credit?
I have not since I've been here. I don't recall ever using one. It's something to explore. Some of those you're going to use. It's usually not enough.
Right.
Right. It's usually in hundreds of thousands, if you will. And typically, the way we do debt here is we try to bundle up, try to do it once a year at most, and then take advantage of there's a cost to issue debt, but if you do more, that cost isn't necessarily
Spread out.
double. It's just there's a cost to have Baird do their work and Moody's do their work, and so it's usually more. And usually the rates are far better. Sometimes you get into, you can get a better rate because our bonds sell really, really well. They price really well, and they usually are gone within hours when we sell. So, but doesn't mean we can't. It's just out there as an option.
Yeah.
If we ever wanted to.
I was just wondering when I saw it in there, I was kind of surprised because I don't remember us ever doing it. And
most of these policies that I'll go through are, I don't want to say they're boilerplate, but they're very common for local government, right? A lot of them are statutorial based, or they're, I'll ask my auditors and they'll look them over and go, yeah, this is very similar to what everybody else has in the state of Wisconsin. So trying to be consistent.
Thank you.
The continuing disclosure policy is really something that is after you issue debt, or there's a company called Emma. It's a national thing where you have debt, and then you have to provide them information for the investors to view. And so this provides just some real high-level information. I have a report in there that's required through Emma. So I usually put the budget out there every year. I put our final ACFR annual report out there. And then if we issue debt, if there would be any issues or problems with the debt, like defeasance or we didn't pay our debt off, we'd have to report that. But we've never had that happen. But it's really more or less for the rating agencies. Moody's looks at that. If you don't do it provide certain information by certain timelines, then they're not happy. So, but that just shows you kind of what's out there. That was a policy we adopted, 10, 15 years ago, just to show that we're doing that. Every time we issue debt, they'll ask, are you still following your continuing disclosure? Yes, it's a follow-up after every debt issue.
So is Emma a state or federal requirement that we have to put it out there, or is it just something you do for when we rebond or we have more borrowing, then it's out there and it's easier for borrowing or the bonding agencies to see it?
Right, it's federal.
It's federal, okay.
So basically it's out there, and I don't even know what would happen if you didn't do it. It wouldn't be well. I mean, if Moody's and your bond counsel says, yeah, you should really do this, you want to do it. It's not hard. It's just providing information for investors. It's a place investors can go. They'll look up our QSIP numbers on our debt, and they can punch up in all of our debt, and they can see all the financials that they want. It's kind of a little library for them, for investors, versus trying to find our website and try to drill and find all this information. It's readily available. The fund balance policy we touched on in the last 2 years. So that was where we had a policy. It was 20%, and then we changed the range from 20 to 30. And so we're following that. There's really no changes there. And then the purchasing policy, like I mentioned earlier, is just kind of defines internally how we should go about purchasing items at different thresholds, dollar amounts, when a public bid is necessary, when you should have, maybe you don't need a public bid, but we want you to have 2 to 3 different quotes potentially on something you're purchasing and have that information available. And then if it gets to a certain threshold, different approval processes throughout there. Again, things that we're following anyway, normally, typically, always following our budget along the way. But it just helps, it's more or less a guide for our internal staff to use when they're going out for purchases. Like, hey, I didn't know if I should get approval for this. It was approved in the budget, but it was $100,000. Do I still need to have it approved again? It's like, no, you don't if it was already approved in the budget. If it wasn't approved, or if it was $101,000, do I have to go back and do this? Or, there's little different words and rules in there for staff. So.
In regard to the purchasing, the last few years, because of if you call it a backlog, but the years it takes to get like a garbage truck or maybe a fire truck, we've kind of bypassed it in a way. We've worked with a vendor and, set it up so we can get it the couple years out. Does that have to be adjusted in our purchasing policy? I don't remember seeing it in there, and I might have missed it in there, because is that something that we're going to continue to have, you think, that?
I think what we've done is, part of the policy states that if you're gonna have something up, you have to talk to the village manager in some cases, which we've done, and then we bring it to committee and board,
Yep.
which would be what we would want. That's direct. It's not just someone going rogue, saying, well, I'm gonna buy it anyway. They have to
Right.
follow these steps, and that's, I'll look through it again and see maybe some areas might be better defined in those cases, but we've tried to address that through board action,
Right.
walking through, because ultimately the board makes those decisions. Anything that's out, kind of an outlier, if you will,
Yep.
they're gonna look at that and.
I mean, the procedure's good. I mean, I'm not saying it isn't, but I didn't see it in there, and maybe just, if it's gonna be something that's gonna continue to be a problem, maybe at least we wanna address it in there in some manner.
I can take a look at that and see if I'll look through that specifically, and then
Yeah,
if need
and it
be,
might,
I can bring it back. And
okay, yeah, it might be in there and I just missed it, but it seems like that's a common thing lately.
yeah, I don't want to leaf through it right now. It's
No, it's fine. Yeah.
I'm not sure that's spelled specifically for that individual purpose, but I think the idea of, hey, this isn't something normal. I need to take these steps.
Yeah.
Or there's, your direct, leadership internally, and then coming to the community boards, getting approval.
I'll move to approve the debt management, continuing disclosure, fund balance, and purchasing policies as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept the policy updates. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. D, consider and act on the annual investment policy review and reports.
So similar to the last four, I separated this one just because it had more reports to it, and I didn't want them to all get bogged down and trying to figure out what reports for what policy. No changes to our investment policy. We've talked about this one before. Our primary objectives with our investments are safety, liquidity, and yield. So we're always making sure that the number one priority is safety, that we're not investing in some crazy new thing that's out there. The village uses Associated Trust Company. We have two different portfolios. I've provided those reports for you to see all the list of the portfolios, all the different investments within there. A lot of them are municipal bonds, similar to stuff that we issue out there, and other people buy them. We have some treasuries and some other areas that keep it more conservative, yet provide some consistent income. So really nothing different in here. This one is very much statutorial based and similar, almost word for word, as many other communities would have. It's a very consistent Wisconsin-related item. So if you have any specific questions, I did provide a list of qualified institutions, which is required in here. Basically, it's just everyone in the village that could provide some kind of investment to us, some presence in the village. We don't have any other investments. We just signed a new contract with Associated Bank. We went through the RFP on that one. We do have one utility CD at Nicolay National Bank. Otherwise, we have not gone out and invested in other local banks. There was a time when CDs were a lot easier to manage. It's a lot of time and effort to try to put a CD to everybody else and track them. And some people do that, but it's not something we're getting better returns on this investment over the last 5 years or so than to participate in doing CD investments like that.
And all the investments are usually held to a maturity. That's why you're looking at the interest income. No volatility or anything, no buying and selling. And
Correct. So a lot of that is if there's an investment, it's a 2-year bond. Well, you ride that one out, and there's a lot of coming and going with that investment list. If you looked at it in 6 months, some things might have been matured, and then they'll turn around and they'll buy a similar like investments, other bonds. So yeah, there's valuation changes. If you have your own personal statements for your own investments at home, if you read it, it'll say, hey, I had interest, but then there's these realized gains and losses. It's all the valuation of the market out there. They'll update your portfolio with the current valuation. It doesn't necessarily translate. If you were to cash it out, you can't really cash these out per se. You take huge penalties, but so our from the accounting side, it's constantly updating the values, not only with the interest income, but then the value of the portfolio is updated and modified monthly.
I'll make a motion to approve the investment policy with no changes.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Policy is accepted. F, consider and act on Assistant Finance Director position description.
We have E.
Whoops,
Yeah,
where did I, where did I
Skipping
skip here?
today.
Oh, we're on F? Sorry, consider and act on it. No, wait, where am I?
Page 76.
Oh, E, did I skip over E?
Yes.
Oh, okay, consider and act on structurally balanced budget policy. Sorry.
No, this is actually the new one. So this is the one that you're not familiar with. So what I wanted to do is, again, as I was going through looking at kind of updating our budget process, one of the highly recommended policies from the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, was to have a structurally balanced budget policy. The state of Wisconsin, by law, you have to have a balanced budget. Right? So, and we do this, and we basically follow this new policy. This is just kind of getting into writing and making it a formal policy on for the village. So a balanced budget just means my expenditures have to equal my expense or my revenues. It doesn't state that what your revenues. So hey, we're going to hire. I just found $100,000. Let's hire a new person. Well, that's great for the first year, but that's not structurally balanced for years going forward. It's that kind of concept. So the village typically does that. It's looking at your recurring revenues, making sure that your recurring expenses are covered by recurring revenues, more or less. That's basically the gist of this. And so, again, we do that here. This just kind of puts it formally in writing. It doesn't mean that there aren't instances where you might have to draw from your fund balance, aka the COVID years where we weren't getting the room tax. We knew eventually that'd come back, so we had to adopt a budget that was actually negative, change in fund balance, because we figured it would just be a short-term problem. So it doesn't mean you can't do that, but those would be extreme situations that you would address at those moments in time. So this is policy. There's a lot of language, but like I said, the basic premise of it is let's make sure that when we have not only we have a zero budget, zero growth, balanced budget, but it's structurally balanced, meaning we're not, finding some random revenue sources to pay for ongoing expenses. So this
Make a
is
motion, we adopt the structural balanced budget policy and recommend it to the Board of Directors.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept the structurally balanced budget policy. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. All right, now we're on to F. Consider an act on Assistant Finance Director position description. Well, you don't do this for a couple months and you get kind of rusty.
We need to meet more often. Yeah. All right, thank you, Chris. As part of our annual appraisal process, every supervisor or manager reviews with their employees their current position description to identify if there's any discrepancies with routine daily duties and responsibilities for that particular position. So this is not uncommon for us to review a position description, have identified certainly some changes within the position description where it ultimately requires finance personnel and village board approval if there's a substantial change in the job duties for that position, so as to provide some oversight to ensure that it's being properly vetted and classified for compensation purposes. So in this particular case, we've been working towards establishing two deep leadership within each department, finance being one of those. A few years ago, we hired an accountant position based on the qualities of the individual, the incumbent in that role. It was very quick for us to identify that they have the capabilities to take on a larger role within the organization and assume some additional duties. And so we've kind of added this assistant finance director position to our accountant role. However, based on the review of duties and some assignments that this particular individual is going to be taking on, with a greater degree of responsibility in a few things like budget management. So in the past, Greg has taken a large and substantial role in budget management. The assistant finance director is taking on some of those responsibilities to provide some additional oversight and duplicity in that. In addition to that, last year, we implemented the first formal five-year capital improvement plan. Our assistant finance director is ultimately responsible for the process of developing that capital improvement plan, packaging it, and getting it prepared and ready for village board consideration. In addition to that, there is direct oversight by this position for tax collection. If you recall, I think it's been 3 years now. This will be year 4 where we've taken on tax collection for the first installment payment in December, January. Previously, that was handled through Brown County. And so by doing that, we've added some additional work and oversight into that collection process. We have some seasonal tax collection employees. About 2 years ago, we hired a cash collection clerk to assist in that process. And so the assistant finance director would provide direct oversight and responsibility over that. So the position description that's included in your packet outlines the duties and responsibilities of that position in review from an administrative standpoint, and Megan from Human Resources is here. We identified that based on these changes in the position, it makes sense to officially hold the title as Assistant Finance Director versus Accountant/Finance Director. And then again, based on those positional responsibilities and the requirements necessary to perform those, it would be necessary for us to evaluate whether or not a wage classification would be changed or justified within our pay matrix. So based on responsibilities, job knowledge, educational requirements, so on and so forth, they ultimately score out. That score determines that position's classification within the matrix. And based on those increased responsibilities, this position would score out at what is considered a grade 11. So it would be one grade ahead of where it is at present. The difference in wage on the low end is roughly about $5,000, a little less than that. On the max end of the scale, it is roughly about a little over $6,000. So staff is recommending the committee and then ultimately the board to adopt the revised position description as it's being presented. If it is approved, then the assistant finance director reclassification would go into effect after that. We are proposing to make it a clean July 1 start, so there would be a slight modification in the wages for the individual in this current role. And again, this, as indicated in the memo, we have had a net savings on wages through the first half of this year by not having a filled management analyst position. So there's substantial savings in that, and those savings would go towards that slight discrepancy in the wages between grade 10 and grade 11 for 2025. So with that, Greg can certainly answer any specific questions about the position and the roles and responsibilities. Megan is here to answer any questions that you may have specifically about the process of reviewing positions, descriptions, and the reclassification of wages within our matrix.
My question is, are there any tasks that this position will no longer be doing, and then who is going to take on those tasks?
No, not really. If it is, there's some shared duties with like AP, vendor setup and things like that. Basically, one of the challenges is always having the best controls in place. So making sure that someone who enters invoices or processes AP can't be modifying the vendors. So there's always going to be an element of small tasks that have to stay. But no, I mean, this position this person's really enhanced it to a level, and we've been adding other functions to the role, and it's just a matter of trying to recognize that. So the tax collection, the CIP, the budget. So there might be some smaller things that we might introduce to Dolly, who has interest in some areas, maybe some reconciliations of certain GL accounts, but certainly this position would then oversee that and manage that process. So yeah, we'll see how the summer goes with all the budget and its responsibilities, and then we'll reevaluate what potential items are that we might want to push off to someone else. But it would be smaller things and allowing that person to grow and get more confident that they might then be ready for assistant finance director type position. So as he alluded to earlier, was trying to build succession planning. So it's always looking at different functions and roles that can be passed along. So that's possible.
And with the new responsibilities too, it's not too much, something that she'll be able to handle and be able to do and not feel overwhelmed with the new responsibilities.
Correct.
So it sounds like the position, right, the individual's capability is what's driving the request to change the position. If the role would be vacant in the future, does it go back to an accountant role, or does it always stay as a assistant finance director position?
No, I think the position would stay there, and that's always a good discussion. Are we doing this for the person, or are we doing this for the organization? And as Joel had said, trying to build succession planning ahead. So when I first started, it was me and clerks. So if I left, you're starting all over again. This is a way to keep someone internally building a structure where if I go, there's someone to easily step into place, and then now if that position's available, someone lower could take that position. So no, that would, to me, I wouldn't do it if that were the case. You do it because it's what's best for the organization first. We also have the advantage of having the person in place to do that and handle that. So it's a win-win for the village, if you will.
As far as funding it, you mentioned that the management analyst position is vacant, so some of that money will go toward it. What's the plan for that for the rest of the year? Are we just gonna keep it vacant?
Good question. We'll save that one for the next agenda item.
All right,
I think it's a great idea. I think for succession management, that's the whole key to this whole thing. And I'll make the motion to recommend the approval of the creation and classification of assistant finance director position description requested by the village manager.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. G, consider, discuss and act on paralegal confidential executive assistant position description and authorization to proceed with recruitment and/or hiring of the position.
All right, thank you, Chris. So to answer your question, Kelly, this is the replacement of that management analyst position. So we are looking to eventually fill that open vacancy. We attempted to make some changes to a position that our recording secretary here tonight vacated in 2024. We were unsuccessful in doing that. We attempted to fill that position, but yet again, we're unsuccessful. And so that position was open as of, I think, February of 2025 officially. So what we are hoping to do is keep that position open for about 5 to 6 months, realize some wage savings for a variety of purposes to support the village's budget for 2025. We are nearing that period of that 5 to 6 month duration. And so staff, including our human resources manager, as well as our village attorney, village president, began talking about that particular position and how it could best meet the needs of not only today, but for the future. There had been a desire as part of that management analyst position to take on kind of a legal assistant role. In recognizing when we recruited for the management analyst, we did not have a substantial turnout of candidates or applicants for the role. And so by making some modifications to the position description, adding a greater degree of emphasis to legal, on the legal end of things, and reconstituting the position title back to kind of a confidential executive assistant / paralegal, that is what we intended to present to you tonight. Through some conscious decision and deliberation and discernment, we thought that providing a greater degree to the paralegal aspect or a greater emphasis on paralegal would provide a greater candidate pool to check from or choose from, one that may also be more professionally trained versus an individual that would be looking to just take on an administrative assistant role. So this particular position description does have a greater degree of emphasis on the legal side of things, with either a degree preferred in paralegal or a certification to do so. And so that was important as part of this particular position description as well. If this position description is approved by committee and board, we would look to begin announcing the position's opening sometime in June or July. look to conduct screenings and interviews sometime in the latter part of July and have somebody in the role sometime in July or August of 2025. So again, Mary, Tony, Megan are here to answer questions about the specific job duties. The position description is included for your consideration tonight.
My question on the position is, are we sure this is what we want? This is like a 180 from what we put together last time, and some of my concerns on that position were who's doing all the clerical work, because there is a lot of clerical work in this position. Is this what we're gonna get, and is this really what we want? Is everybody weighed in, and this is something that we think is gonna be effective and do what we want? And I know it's changed now, we got Tony here now, so things have changed a bit, but I just wanna make sure that, you know, we've got the position that we really need, and I think it's more what it should be, the new position, but.
Yeah, I can weigh in on that, and then certainly if Tony wants to pipe in. This is something that we have thought about and talked about, and that was part of the reason back when the management analyst position was unsuccessful, that we decided to hold on it because we really wanted to make sure that whatever we did next was the right move, and wasn't just the right move in the moment. So knowing that then Tony was coming on board, and determining what that would look like for us. So, I mean, we have had multiple conversations, Joel and Mary, Mary and I, Tony and I, about what our office needs and what we'll need in the future. And definitely, you know, noticing now not having someone in that position for a good length of time, that has also helped identify those duties and responsibilities that we know are missing at this point.
So another question, it looks like in the position description, this position will be a recording secretary for all board and committee meetings. So are you saying like park board, bike ped, some of them that we've had the park and rec secretary taking minutes for are no longer doing that? Or am I reading into that wrong? Because it says all in there, all committee and meetings. Or is it ultimately their responsibility, or how?
No, it would be consistent with what the previous position held, so it's any and all boards, committees, or commissions that they're assigned to. So the Parks and Recreation Secretary is assigned to the Bike and Ped Committee, they're assigned to the Park Board. This particular position would take care of all the other boards and commissions that aren't directly assigned, so Finance and Personnel, Public Works Protection, Site Plan, Plan Board. That would be this position's responsibility. The village clerk still retains the statutory responsibility of recording minutes for village board meetings or board of review. Anything that statutorily assigns the village clerk to those meetings would still be the case.
The clerk, okay. So they will not be responsible for every meeting and doing minutes for every meeting. That would be overwhelming, I would think, with all the meetings we have. The other question I have is election work. I didn't see anything in there about helping with election work, and again, maybe I missed it, but in the past, I believe Terry did help with some of that. Is that something they will continue to do, or is that no longer part of that job? And who's gonna take on and help with some of the election work?
Yeah, so that was intentionally left out of the position description. It was intentionally left out of the management analyst position for a variety of reasons, but mainly because the clerk's office also gained an additional staff member. Prior to it being the confidential executive secretary, you had the clerk, you had a deputy clerk, and then that was it. Now, since we've essentially eliminated the assessment technician position and basically converted that into a deputy clerk role, they now have a full-time deputy clerk. And so there's three deep, three individuals working in the clerk's office, whereas before there was only two.
So there's a feeling that that'll work out fine, and even during the really heavy election, I mean, if they needed help, would that person help? If there is help needed?
Yeah, during elections, I think everybody recognizes we're all there to help. So every election, somebody's answering phones or answering questions, assisting in that regard. The clerk's office has been advised that on those heavy election years, whether it's gubernatorial or presidential, they are to budget, and they do, they budget for additional
Yep.
wages, and they bring in their election inspectors to work during those 2-week absentee periods. And so it's doable. It's a matter of them managing their staff resources effectively within that department.
Then the other question, and Megan, you can maybe ask this, sorry, I'm asking a million questions. The wage, it's similar or it's the same as the analyst position, is that correct, when it was a management analyst? I was just wondering, comparable between the two, because to me, the analyst seemed like it would have been a higher paying position than this position, but please address that.
Yeah, and Megan, certainly jump in there if you can. More or less, there's different criteria. So on the management analyst position, there was a higher degree of, let's say, education than this, but this position, being that it has some additional certifications that are desired or preferred, it kind of created some balance there. In addition to that, because we've added some additional work in the legal aspect of it from a job responsibility standpoint, it broadened the amount of responsibility as well to the position. So there was an opportunity there to look at that. It's also consistent with other positions that have similar responsibilities within the village. Deputy Clerk 2, some positions that happen to be in public safety records, so on and so forth. So there's some equity and consistency between the responsibilities of this position and others within the organization that have similar breadth and scope.
Okay. Thank you.
So I will make a motion to recommend approval of the creation and classification of the paralegal confidential executive assistant position and the advertising and hiring of paralegal confidential executive assistant position as requested by the village manager.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Items for next agenda. If there's nothing, we will move on. There's another group of people waiting to come in. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed, we are adjourned. Thank you.